It was here in the basement of my house that I had a profound encounter with the Lord. I was 22 years old and had been deeply struggling to find purpose, meaning, and direction in my life. I didn't know what I wanted to do or who I wanted to be because I was still in a season of rejecting the one who could tell me exactly that, Jesus. For different reasons, I had come to reject Jesus and wanted to explore spirituality on my own terms. Spent a couple years reading about New Age spirituality and had taken on many of its beliefs. I had been struggling with my mental health at the time, so I had also stumbled into it as a pursuit of self-help and wellness. I looked to crystals and meditations to help ground me in moments of anxiety, but one day I was so overwhelmed, I didn't know which crystal to reach for, which meditation to do, and I remember just saying out loud, I wish I only had to remember one thing in these moments of panic. And then it hit me. Jesus. It's literally Jesus. And I heard that in my spirit. And it certainly didn't feel like a thought of my own because I was actively avoiding Jesus. He had been reaching out to me sooner. And many moments had led up to this, but this is when it finally clicked. That all I needed to restore calm and a sense of perspective was simply remembering the person of Jesus. That Jesus would always be a starting point and an ending point for whatever I was asking about, or whatever I was worried about. And I thank God for opening my ears to hear him that day because my life looks very different now. I tell you this story to relay the priceless concept of the Immanuel Moment, a phrase that describes a person's awareness of Jesus' presence in their life or a time that God was speaking to them. When broken down, the word Immanuel quite literally means God with us, and this is a name given to Jesus in the scriptures. Chances are you've probably had a moment like this where you perceived that God was trying to communicate with you, and maybe you weren't sure if it was God or not. If you've been baptized, it's part of your inheritance to hear the voice of God as a child of God and co-heir to the kingdom through Jesus. Other than the salvation of your soul, there's nothing that the Father wants more than intimacy with you in this way, that you hear his voice and you respond. Jesus himself tells us in the Gospel of John that he is the good shepherd. He goes on to say, "My sheep hear my voice. I know them and they follow me." Hearing God with accuracy definitely takes practice, and it requires faith of the recipient to act on what they perceive to have heard from God. The following are 5 personal video testimonies of parishioners sharing about moments when God was speaking to them or made his guiding presence very known to them. Listen for any cues or common themes as to why they believed it was God speaking to them. There are different ways that God speaks to us, and it's important to be aware of them. And finally, consider if you've had any experiences like these of your own. Take time to ask Jesus to bring them to mind, record them in a journal or audio message, and put it away for a rainy day, because you never know when you'll need the reminder.
My family was having a hard time. We had had some financial issues, and this had been going on for a couple of years, and we weren't sure if we should be selling our house or not. We had lived in this house for 17 years. It's where, our kids were born, where they had been raised. And as silly as it might seem, houses really connect you as a family and your place of home, your place, a sense of space. And, I'm sure everybody can understand how you get attached to these things. And having to give something up like that really be traumatic. For us in particular, because my son Gregory uses a wheelchair, we had lived in this house and pretty much fixed this house up to make it wheelchair accessible. And now you're going to have to find a new place that works for that. And that was probably my biggest fear, was that I wasn't going to be able to find some place to live where that would work for Gregory. So anyway, I am the PCL here at the parish, and we were sent down to the diocese for a workshop. And there was a break, and they said they had Eucharistic adoration in the chapel. I walked into Eucharistic adoration, and I just had this Like, I was like, I really don't know what to do. And please, God, tell me what to do. And I knelt down at Eucharistic adoration. And, you just sit there in the silence and the presence of Jesus. Suddenly, I just had a really clear picture in my head of me sitting in my living room, or my family room, and I was surrounded by boxes and paper and bubble wrap and everything else, and I was packing. And this might sound strange, I was also laughing. It almost knocked me back. I was on my knees, kneeling at the pew, and I just sat back up and I was like, ooh, I totally have my answer, like what I have to do. And I knew in that moment that I had to pack up my house and sell my house and move. But I also knew in that moment that God was telling me that it would be okay because I would still be laughing about it. That, for me, was the most tangible encounter that I had with Jesus, where it was like he was telling me this would be okay. And it was, packing up a house that you've lived in with 4 kids for 17 years is no easy task. It's, things accumulate, and, at the time the market wasn't great and you're arguing with buyers and, and what they want you to do to fix and everything else. And it can be really overwhelming. And we ended up in a situation where our closing got postponed many times, but through it all, I just kept going back to that moment. And I was like, God told me this was going to be all right. And here's the end of the story is it was more than all right. And even when, after we sold the house and looked for a new place to live, and you're looking at all these places and none of them will work, all of a sudden there's this like perfect house that totally works for our family, and it couldn't have been a better situation. So I think that's where we just always have to remember that even when we're afraid and we don't know that things are going to work out, God loves us so much that the solution is always there. Even though you can't see it, he can see it. And you just got to trust. There isn't another time that I felt like so spoken directly to, like God was speaking directly to me. I just had such a clear picture, and at the same time, a realization. Like I said, it knocked me back up, like I was on my knees and I sat right back up on the pew and I was like, whoa, like that was pretty clear message. Like, this is what you have to do. I do think he was talking really directly to me. From what I do in the parish, like you hear all these like stories about saints and all these things that happen to other people and their encounters in God, and you meet people who've really had an encounter in God. And until that, I'd spent a lot of time of my life being a practicing Catholic who had, definitely bought into like Jesus loves me and, he's looking out for me and everything, but I never really had like that, like, well, he never actually talked to me, like kind of thing that, it made it much more personal.
And space was erased, you are close like the sky to the stars. No, I am known and I'm loved by a God who would bleed out for me. Oh, I'm home in the arms of the one who has come set me free.
Okay, so when I was in college, there was this girl. So this girl wanted me to go with her to a pro-life walk at her parish. And I really wanted to go to this thing with her because when there is this girl, you want to do everything that she asks you to do. And she asked me to do this, I wanted to do it. But what the diocese had done was consecrating the diocese to Our Lady of Guadalupe. There was an evangelization class. It was like a weekend class to teach us how to evangelize to others. What happened was I went to this thing and I was not feeling it. And I wasn't getting much out of it because I was upset because I wanted to be somewhere else. So this thing ended with adoration. And in adoration, I was still not having a good time. I still wasn't feeling the presence of God. I wasn't really getting anything out of it until the priest went to take the monstrance away. And when the priest went to take the monstrance away, I flew into a panic. I got literally scared. You know when a baby is being held by their parent and they put the baby down for whatever reason or give the baby to somebody else to hold and the baby starts crying? That's basically what it was like. I was a child upset that my father was leaving me. Now, I mean, obviously he wasn't really leaving me. God's presence is everywhere, but again, it's like the way a child would react to like their parent leaving the room or something. I reflected on it the next day and I told everyone what I had experienced. It's the most Eucharistic experience I've had in terms of acknowledging the real presence. The real presence, that's real. If it weren't actually Jesus' body, blood, soul, and divinity, that wouldn't have happened. Because it didn't happen naturally. It didn't feel natural, at least. I'm pretty certain that what happened was supernatural. Because it was like out of nowhere and completely opposite from what I was feeling before. And if the Eucharist weren't what Jesus said it was, then this wouldn't have happened. So in terms of where you feel the presence of God, where you know the presence of God is it in the Eucharist.
'Cause you don't leave me, and you don't leave me, you don't leave me. Just sing that. And you don't leave me, you're always close to me. You don't leave me, you never run away. You don't leave me, by my side all the time. You don't leave me.
I have so many God stories in my life. The first story involves my brother, who was a resident of Morris Hills Convalescent Center across the street from Morristown Hospital. He'd been a resident there for 11 years. He was admitted to the hospital the day before on a Thursday, and I had gone up to see him. And I was coming back on 287 from Mawa visiting a hospice patient. And as I was approaching Madison Avenue, I'm saying, no, I'm not going to go and visit him. I was there yesterday. And we were also planning to go down the shore for the weekend to visit friends Friday night and come home on Sunday. So I thought he'd be fine because I was there yesterday. When all of a sudden, my car just veered over. I don't even remember pushing the steering wheel. It just went boom over to Madison Avenue. And it was almost like God was saying, you need to do this. And as it turned out, he was in isolation, and I went in to see him, and his pulmonologist happened to be there and called me out of the room and told me that they wanted to put him on hospice because he needed a trach, and they were afraid that he would not survive the surgery. So I gave permission for him to start Monday on hospice, and they said that it wouldn't be imminent. It wasn't imminent. It would be a while. At that time, the nurse had told me I had to leave, that there was limited time with isolation patients. So I told them, I said, we're going down to visit Judy and Al. I said, we'll be home Sunday. We'll come up right after Mass. So he said, fine, when we left. And I called him on Saturday from my friend's house. And he said, Mary Claire, I really need to talk to you. And I said, okay. I said, I'm outside. I'm by myself. We can talk. He said, no. When you come up tomorrow, I have to talk to you. I said, Eugene, we can come. We can be home in an hour and a half. I can come now. He said, no, I don't want you to leave. Just when you come home. Well, that night I had very restless sleep. Pictures of my parents who are deceased, my brother Stephen, who's deceased, were coming in my mind. And I got up very early the next morning, went downstairs and checked my phone, and sure enough, it was the hospital. They had called to say that he passed. So had that God instance not taken me to visit my brother, I would not have seen him before he passed.
I am alive, it's where I once lay. Lies fade into dust as the king has conquered the grave. Hands lifted high, I will worship with all of my strength.
Back when I was in college, I did my undergraduate studies at Providence College. I was not a practicing Catholic at the time and didn't really have too much of an interest in pursuing theology or learning about it, but I liked the school, so I went. And I started off as a Bachelor of Science in biology for my major, thinking that I would do something in medicine, maybe med school, I wasn't quite sure. And also as part of the curriculum, when I was going through school, I had to take some theology classes. So they were just basic classes, and I took them just to check off that requirement, but I wasn't really that into them. I took one called Catholic Social Thought. That class taught us a lot about how to think about a lot of moral and social issues, real life issues, in the light of our faith. So it was just very eye-opening to me, and it all just made sense. It was all very logical, but it was based in our faith, and I just loved it. I would read my notes after class, and I was just fascinated that I had never heard about things like grace and evil and free will and theology of the body. And I remember calling my parents saying, "Did you know about this?" and telling them about what I learned in class, and just applying our faith to the real world. And that was really impactful. So it came time in my sophomore year to pick my classes for the next term. And I knew I was really unhappy with my current major of biology. And I was also kind of gaining this interest in theology, although still not really practicing my faith all that much. I still wanted to pursue medicine, so I still wanted to take the biology classes, but I just couldn't do 2 semesters of everything. It was just too much for me. And so I decided that I would become a Bachelor of Arts in biology, which meant I only had to take 1 semester of biology and organic chemistry and physics. But in making that decision, I felt really unsettled because I felt like I was giving up. And so as I was thinking, what can I do to make up for this shortcoming that I'm experiencing now? It just kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. All of a sudden, as I was flipping through my course catalog, the thought came to my mind, I should be a theology minor. I went from having that very unsettling feeling, that very anxious feeling, to all of a sudden just realizing that this makes total sense and this is what I'm supposed to do, and I'm totally okay with it, and this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I was so happy and relieved in that moment. And it was, as I said, it was just like I got hit over the head with it. And there were a lot of moments that led up to that. But ultimately, this one, I think God really gave me the push for me to realize that I should study this more. I should look into this more. I should start practicing my faith more. As part of that change in my studies, I had to take an upper level theology class. I found a class called Thomistic Moral Theology, and it was with a priest who also happened to be a biology professor. So I walked into Thomistic Moral Theology very naive, very nervous, not knowing what to expect, and the class was full of seminarians, just regular college students as well. And one of those regular college students was a very bright gentleman named Mark Sirocco. And little did I know it at the time, but 4 years later, that priest who taught that class would then marry Mark and I at Providence in 2013. I think if I hadn't had that moment, and if I hadn't had all those little moments leading up to the time when I just decided that theology is what I need to study more. This is where I need to focus my thoughts and my work. Life would be very different today. I wouldn't have all my kids here, but.
Darkness to bring me to your light, Immanuel. Whenever I hide, you will always go seeking. Ready or not, here you coming to meet me. You fight for my heart and you give me the victory. Immanuel, there's no distance.
My story is not a singular story per se. It's a story of my discernment. It's the story of my journey to the priesthood, and how really it's a lifetime journey. It's not a singular event. There's no Paul-like moment where I heard the Lord speaking to me, but rather it's a series of things that happened during the course of my lifetime, which sort of guided me to the priesthood, and also made me aware how important it is to be open to hearing God speaking to you, because a good part of my journey is me not listening, or me not paying attention to those signs and to those things that were happening to me during the course of my life that were pushing me in this particular direction. People ask all the time, did you know that you've always wanted to be a priest? And the answer is yes and no. I mean, God's always known that he's wanted me to be a priest, and he's allowed me to experience different things throughout my life that were encouraging me to make that decision, but I wasn't paying attention. After I graduated from college, I didn't really have a plan. I worked several different jobs, none of which were things that I wanted to necessarily do for a living. They were just things to occupy my time. And I had a sense of unhappiness, in the sense that I could see people my own age moving on, doing seemingly, having careers and so forth, and yet here I was kind of aimless. But the one thing that always brought me happiness had been my faith. And I can remember going to my pastor at one point and saying that, I'm thinking about possibly going to the priesthood. And he had said, well, before you make any commitments, become more involved in the parish, become more active in different things. So I became a Eucharistic minister to the homebound. I joined the Knights of Columbus, and all of that sort of thing. I started going to daily mass as often as I could with my work schedule, because his point was that God is calling all of us to be active in our faith, calling us all to be active Christians. And just because you're a single guy with sort of a lot of free time, that doesn't necessarily mean you're being called to the priesthood. It means that he's calling you to be an active Christian, as all of us are. So I did that for a while, and it was if there was one particular moment that I think that I really felt like this was the right direction, was when I was taking communion to the homebound, and what a profound experience that had upon me. More so from their reaction to receiving the Eucharist. Sometimes we treat going to Mass as an obligation, some sort of burden, but these were people who had been going to Mass like everybody else, but now they couldn't go, they were homebound. And to have someone bring the Eucharist to them, certainly as they recognized they were at the sort of those final stages of their life, that this was a blessing to them, and it provided them a tremendous amount of comfort. They weren't alone, and it was the presence of Christ in the Eucharist let them know that they were loved, that they were cared for, and that's brought real peace to their hearts. And seeing them at peace sort of filled me with not only a deeper love of the Eucharist, but also a desire to be able to do that for the rest of my life. There were certain moments that did click, and there are certain people that do stand out. There was one couple in particular. The gentleman's name was Rudy, and I've visited people before who are, just waiting to die, and they will tell you that. But then there are those who are homebound who seem to enjoy every day, the day that even though they might be by themselves, even though they might not be able to get out of bed, they still have a very positive attitude, and he always did. And he passed away shortly after I was ordained, because the ordination chalice that I have was paid for by him. He bought it for me.
There's no distance existing in your eyes. You coming close like the sky to the sunrise. Crash through darkness to bring me to your light. Emmanuel.